Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Mofield, and I am an assistant professor at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, and I teach in the gifted graduate education courses there, and also that includes the EDD program in leadership and organizational change. But I'm also the NAGC chair for curriculum studies, and I'm really involved in writing high quality gifted curriculum, and I also do a lot of research with the social emotional learning side of our gifted students. But today I want to talk about some of my most recent research concerning collaborative teaching practices. And this comes from my own experience in leading a district through this initiative where we went from a pull-out model to also include reaching out and working with regular ed teachers. And we did this so that we could build capacity in our regular ed teachers so that they could better meet the needs of gifted learners who are gifted all day, every day, not just the times when they come to the gifted pull-out class. And with that endeavor were many challenges and many great opportunities. But as I started to lead that effort, there were not a lot of resources and research available. So I thought I would take it on and see and actually do a small research study within the district and share my results of what worked and what did not work. So big questions for today in just this very short time. I want to talk about what makes collaboration successful. What does it really look like? What should it look like, and what works and what doesn't work? And I'll point you to a few resources that you might find useful. All right, so when we talk about collaboration, we've got to have this understanding that we're acknowledging that two experts are coming together, two professionals, and that we value the expertise of both. And a lot of times, from my experience, our gifted ed teachers would be really eager to go into these classrooms and share this wonderful knowledge we've learned from professional learning conferences and all these like a bag of tricks without really valuing and listening to the expert teacher. And so one way to think about collaboration is that you are co-thinkers in this endeavor. So there are a number of collaborative practices, and there are slight nuances to all of these. I just want to briefly talk about how they're different. Consulting is really like more of like, I'm the expert and let me tell you what to do. Then there's co-planning, where the gifted ed teacher may not actually go in and do any co-teaching, but there might be a lot of opportunities to work with a regular ed teacher and talk about ways to differentiate assignments or tasks for the lesson. Then there's actual co-teaching, which are really getting into someone's territorial space here, and there are entire books written about this. And then there's instructional coaching, and that's when you are the co-thinker with the teacher and you're trying to pull out this inner potential that they have and help them realize that, oh, I could do this, and I could pursue this with my gifted learners without you actually telling them what to do. And so all of these are capacity building forms of preparing teachers to be better equipped to reach gifted learners. So my research question was, well, how do our gifted ed teachers and regular ed teachers perceive collaboration? Like, did they think it was a good thing? What did they think about it? So this is very small research endeavor, but it's more than, I originally just wanted to write an article on what I thought, but it was probably better to capture more perspectives. So and it got published that way. So I sent this out to 21 participants, and we did a survey interview, and then did some open coding. And basically, I asked them, what benefits do you notice? What supports and structures were beneficial? And where were some of the obstacles that you encountered during this process? And, they saw a great increase in student learning. It increased classroom teachers' capacity to differentiate, but also, like, this is common sense. Like, some of the main concerns were there were a lot of time constraints and conflicting assumptions on who was supposed to do what and what gifted students actually need. And that's consistent with the research. So I'll briefly just highlight a few of the things the regular ed teachers said that they felt like they could provide new perspectives. They were given new perspectives. A lot of suggestions were given. There was a lot of positive things going on. Here's another quote. It looks like the lesson, there was added challenge, complexity, and depth. Students didn't see their work as busy work anymore, so those were good things. Some barriers were that our teachers could only be at these schools 2 or 3 days a week. They had multiple schools. So it's kind of hit or miss on who they collaborated with. And so it was kind of sporadic, which doesn't allow for any kind of sustained learning on the teacher. And unfortunately, we were not able to do best practices of cluster grouping. We had some administrators believe that they would just spread the wealth. And so when gifted students are just sporadically put in classes, if administrators don't understand what best practices are in gifted education, that was not very helpful. So it was really hard for our gifted ed teachers to consult and collaborate with multiple teachers. And also, it was noted that we still had our pull-out program, and that if all we did was collaboration, that just sprinkling here and there a little bit of differentiation is not a full program. And so the responses from these surveys were basically that it's a great way to serve students, but it should not be the only way. It should be seen within a spectrum of services, and more intense efforts were definitely needed, because too often these collaboration efforts were to be sprinkled through the year and with various teachers. Another thing were these conflicting assumptions. There were still a lot of closed minds about or perceived lack of support from the administration, and a lot of these underlying assumptions that gifted students would be fine without this kind of support. Another issue was, it's easy to talk about the problems in it, that teachers are so focused on getting ready for state tests, and that a lot of times regular ed teachers didn't want to do anything special or different, or do any kind of tiered assignments or any kind of special things that the gifted ed teacher was bringing, because they didn't want to get off this prescribed scope and sequence. They needed to stay on the same page for that day, and they were afraid to move beyond that. So that was an issue. And sometimes, and this actually happened with me because I would actually do this and collaborate with teachers as well, they just didn't understand why we were there, what we were doing. They would just say, yeah, come on in, let's collaborate, let me see you model a lesson. But then they would go and make copies or get coffee. And so, and that happened often. And so there's a lack of understanding, even though I even talked to them beforehand, like, this is what I'm going to do. These are some things to look for. But then they like leave. So anyways, there are some things that we have learned through this, that we need a more formal structure. So now we created a form. These are some things you can look at as I'm modeling this lesson, and afterwards we're going to reflect, and then what are your next steps? Those would be better things that I could do as an instructional coach in that role. Okay, so lessons learned. You have to have administrative buy-in. It cannot be the gifted ed teacher going to classroom teachers and saying, do you mind if I come in and we work together a little bit? It's like they're almost selling Girl Scout cookies or something. It's got to be like the administrator, the building administrator, needs to stand up in front of the faculty and say how much they value this, that differentiation is needed for all spectrums of students. We differentiate for ELL learners, for students with disabilities. What are we doing for students with high potential? And advocate for collaboration, whatever form you are doing it. This also has to be implemented in the context of systemic change, not just like this random thing that the gifted ed program is doing. It's got to be situated with the district goals. So if the district is proclaiming all means all, this has to be coming down from the district level. Like it all has to fit together instead of this random thing the gifted program is now doing. Very clear purposes and roles must be given. So in our district for a little bit, we were like, well, what are we doing? We're supposed to collaborate. We're supposed to kind of push in, but what does that mean? Are we co-teachers? Are we consultants? Are we calling ourselves coaches here? So being clear on that is really important. And then, of course, building relationships and trust. So how in the world do you do that? Well, I'm going to talk about a few things. We know from previous research that collaboration is much more productive when teachers have clear guiding questions that facilitate collaborative conversations. So this is a model that my colleague and I have developed. Really, I don't want to take too long to explain it, but throughout this process, you develop a goal, a purpose, a plan, and then you reflect all around shared understanding. And this is all within the frame of a team, TEAM, of trust, engaging each other's expertise, aligning the assumptions and beliefs of each party, and maintaining the relationship. So a few guiding questions, like if we had this at the beginning, it would have just been so helpful. At least we'd have a little piece of paper to go by as we're planning and collaborating with teachers. So what is it we're doing today? What's our main goal for our quick 15 minutes that we have right now? How is this going to be done? Who is going to do what? What resources do we need? And reflecting afterwards is so important. Otherwise, it's like you're done modeling the lesson, or you're done co-teaching, or you're done co-planning, but if you don't come back and revisit what worked and didn't work, neither co-thinker will grow. Now, there's this awesome thing about building trust. You see this SCARF model here. So there actually is something called the SCARF model. Not a model like that, but a model, and I'm just being funny here, by David Rock. And basically, this is how you build trust. You think about each one of these things. These are either threats, or they can be, or we can think about in a relationship how we can minimize these threats and increase them as enhancers. So think about the relationships you have with people, and if you have an issue going on with a person, it's likely related to one of these issues. There's a status issue. There's something going on in the power relationship. One person might feel like they're stupid. Or maybe there's an issue with certainty. Like, have you ever had the principal say, hey, Miss Mofield, I need to see you in the office at the end of the class period. Oh, what did I do? Being uncertain, what's going on? So to address this threat, we have clear roles. We have clear things that we're supposed to do. Autonomy. There is a sense of choice in what the teacher's doing. This is not about saying, hey, I'm going to come in your classroom and model this great lesson I learned at a conference. This is about co-laboring not just sharing resources, not just saying, here you go, but co-laboring and then them choosing what's best. They're having a voice and the developing that relationship, person to person, human to human, and for them to understand that there's a sense of fairness here. Even little things like if you get to leave for lunch because you have a special role as a gifted ed teacher or as a coach, and you get to bring in outside food and the other teachers aren't allowed to do that, like they don't perceive that as fair. So even little things like that can impact our trust and relationships. This is life-changing. This is called Presuming Positive Intent, and it's discussed in Kathy Key's book on results coaching. But basically, how we communicate is key with others and is presuming that everyone wants to do their very best and that people aren't walking around as victims and not knowing what to do. And so just think about your language as you communicate, instead of saying like, well, have you ever thought about why the student is acting out in your class? Because they're so bored. Or, could you try to maybe offer him some choices? Or can you tell me why you chose to do peer tutoring here? These are things like we want to say, and it comes across like they don't know what they're doing. And so instead, we want to assume that they do know what they're doing. We value that they have thought through this. And so you can say things, well, given what we know about the characteristics of gifted students, what behaviors are you seeing in your students? And then that's going to lead them to uncover like, oh, they might need more challenging learning experiences. So there's a lot more I could say, but that's all I'm going to say. There's other great coaching language. Now, instructional coaching is this whole other thing, but I think some things we all could learn as we're collaborating with others that we want to ask, like these types of questions, clarifying questions, and that just makes sure that we're making our assumptions explicit. Like we're going to be on the same page here, and then throughout that conversation, affirming their values. Like, you know what you're doing is really great because it's going to show them how to think as a disciplinarian about this issue, and that's what we do in gifted education. And then this is like where we unlock their potential, and this is for instructional coaching. This is when it's like you help them have that aha moment. So that's activating the possibilities and getting them to reflect so much that it activates this idea. So, to align more closely to what we know about infusing creativity with content, what if you tried to think about how historians apply creativity, something like that. I don't know, instead of just building the Alamo out of sugar cubes, right? All right, so other lessons learned very quickly. We want to be strategic with those that we work with. Don't collaborate with people who don't want to collaborate with you, especially if you're starting this new thing. Work with the welcoming. Work with the teachers who are like all-star teachers who are going to be so excited about it, and then they will share with others what's going on. Build a toolkit for differentiated instruction, not just different activities. So our teachers, and even myself, would be like, oh, I got this great activity. We're going to come in and things are going to explode and it's going to be all hands-on and they're going to love me. So take yourself out of it. Remember, this is about building capacity in other teachers. And so, have your differentiated instruction strategies ready to share, but it shouldn't just be about you coming in and doing cool things. Use a common framework for differentiation to help everyone in the whole district be on the same page. So in our district, we use the integrated curriculum model where we're going to differentiate by adding a concept, by advancing the content, and making sure that we're using an advanced processing or thinking model. And then continually evaluate, is this really working? Are we doing this strategically enough where this is actually impacting student learning? So just to wrap up, I'm going to show you a few slides, and you can pause this if you would like, where my colleague and I, Dr. Vicki Phelps, we've come up with a resource where we have unpacked all of this: co-teaching, coaching, and collaboration, communication, even collaborating with parents and other community members. But these are ideas of roles that you could share. Remember, as you ease in, work with those who want to work with you. Sometimes it may just be like, hey, this is an opportunity. You've come to me with a challenge you have with a gifted student. So, would you mind if I come to your classroom and observe? And that way you can watch what's going on in their classroom. You can learn that teacher's style and then ease in to something like co-teaching later. But perhaps you just build a relationship with the teacher and then start working towards co-planning. It's really important to, if you do get into co-teaching, that you just straight out talk about the assumptions you have, and how much you're willing to co-plan together. Any assumptions what are the stories we're telling ourselves right now about co-teaching? Okay, and so there's a lot more involved with co-teaching here, but if you're familiar with Friend and Cook's models, so many of these can be applied. And my colleague and I, we've put names to a lot of these: scout and stretch teaching, where one person teaches and the other one scouts to see, to identify students through talent spotting. But I won't go into those. I'll just tell you about a resource. If you're interested in more of this, this will be released in July of 2020. Also, this is my contact information and also my co-authors. And I'm also sharing a link to this most recent research study that I have discussed. It goes into more detail of these 10 lessons learned, and I hope it's helpful for you if your district is doing any kind of collaborative practice or push-in, that it will help you start to think about the structure which will allow that to function. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and I hope you all have a great day.